This is a sports catastrophe production. Hey there, ho there, it's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to another sports catastrophe on this date. And on this day, December 9th, 1949. Yeah, we're going way back. One of the biggest rivalries in football ended. It was the NFL and the All-American Football Conference. Finally making peace and merging. Hang on a minute, you say. Don't you mean the NFL AFL merger? Nope, because before the AFL was a glimmer, a twinkle in people's eyes like Lamar Hunt in 1959. There was another football rivalry, NFL challenger. It was the AAFC, the All-American Football Conference. So anyway, the AAFC actually attracted many of the nation's best players and actually had innovations to the game. And the AAFC did okay, even though it was 4 seasons. They still had teams. 3 other teams made it to the NFL, as you can see on the newspaper article. So the NFL would merge San Francisco, Cleveland, and Baltimore into their league. So the Niners, Browns, and Colts franchises would actually be the predecessors in the AAFC. Now the problem is that when you think of Baltimore Colts, actually there was a team called Baltimore. It only lasted 1 season, but that is not the Baltimore Colts franchise that merged to be Indianapolis. It was a different franchising. Anyway, the AAFC actually had their teams play in a double round robin format in the regular season. Each team had a home game and an away game with each of the other teams. Well, I mean, when you have 8 teams, you have 14 games. But the Cleveland Browns won every year in the AAFC. The AAFC was actually founded by Arch Ward, who was legendary for starting baseball's All-Star game in 1933 and the College All-Star game in football, where a list of college stars would play against the defending NFL/Super Bowl champions. So the NFL, well, Ward was hoping the NFL would expand and all that. So anyway, the AAFC was ready to go. They issued franchises for Buffalo, Chicago, Cleveland, Los Angeles, New York, and San Francisco. And they added Brooklyn and Miami later on. Baltimore was close to getting it. So anyway, the 8 franchises would build their teams. But the shocking thing was Cleveland getting Paul Brown as their head coach because he was the leader of the 1942 National Championship team at Ohio State and would coach at the Naval Station Great Lakes thing. And Paul Brown would have the great innovative spirit that made him think all that. Of course, the NFL did not welcome his new rival. Anyway, a lot of people said the NFL was not keen to the AAFC. Well, of course. Who would? But unfortunately for the NFL, it was a formidable challenge, and it actually worked. The AAFC actually had advantages that the NFL didn't have. For one thing, it was founded by a key figure in a major newspaper, of course, Arch Ward, with the Chicago Sports Tribune, because it had the ample attention in the press. The AAFC owners actually were wealthier than their NFL counterparts, which was weird. Cleveland's Mickey McBride, who was a real estate and taxi magnate, San Francisco's Anthony Morabito, who was in lumber, Chicago's John L. Keeshan in trucking, and LA's group that included Don Amici. Not that Don Amici. I think it was Don Amici Sr. Yeah, Don Amici Sr. Or was it real the man Don Amici? Because I know he was in Cocoon. Was that the same guy in Cocoon? Yeah, he was in Cocoon at 78 years old. That was him, Don Amici, and Louis Meyer from MGM Studios. Also, the peacetime produced a surplus of talent and an opening for a new league because many players couldn't get in the NFL. They could get in another one. Return to civilian life. Well, the AAFC had 40 of the 66 college All-Stars, 2 Heisman Trophy winners, and more than 100 players with NFL experience. And air travel was not viable. The AAFC actually put teams in Florida and California, whereas the NFL just basically were in the Northeast or the Midwest. The NFL never fielded more than 10 teams. Anyway, there was a lot of maneuvers and intrigue and all that. So, in 1946, there were 8 teams. The New York Yankees, yes, that was a team in the AAFC, not the baseball team. The Brooklyn Dodgers, why would they name that after the baseball team? The Buffalo Bisons, playing at Civic Stadium. Well, the Yankees playing at Yankee Stadium, AAFC. Brooklyn playing at Ebbets Field. Miami Seahawks. Yeah, Seattle's like, there was a Seahawks team before us? And the Miami at Burdine Stadium, a.k.a. the Orange Bowl. Civic Stadium, known as War Memorial Stadium. The Cleveland Browns playing at Municipal Stadium. The Chicago Rockets playing at Soldier Field, sharing with the Bears. Actually, no. Contrary to popular belief, the Bears were playing at Wrigley Field for football, not Soldier Field. The LA Dons were at the LA Memorial Coliseum sharing with the Rams. And the San Francisco 49ers were at Kessar. So the first game was Cleveland versus Miami, and Cleveland won 44-0. It would be a microcosm about the league. Thanks to Paul Brown's innovations in organization and coaching, Cleveland were on their way to setting the standard of football significance. Miami had the biggest fiasco. They were terrible. They were 3-11, and they were shut down. They actually lost 2 home games to be postponed due to hurricanes. There were a lot of gates and all that. The AAFC actually had a problem in 1946 because the league would have a wide gap between its best and worst teams. But the AAFC would kind of end pro football's color line because Cleveland had Murray Motley and Bill Willis, became the first black players to play pro football since 1933. This was before Jackie Robinson's debut with Brooklyn. All that. So Cleveland were 12-2. In the East was just terrible. The New York team was 10-3-1. Otherwise, everything else was just terrible. Cleveland actually had to come back from a deficit to beat the Yankees 14-9. Anyway, it was still pretty good. So Chicago had a problem. But they got back. Miami was replaced by Baltimore, who would be playing at Municipal Stadium. The Buffalo Bisons would become the Buffalo Bills, and the NFL was forced to add a 12 game to their schedule. The AAFC actually was very successful. You know, the entire coaching staff of the 1946 NFL champion Chicago Bears actually watched the Browns' opening game. And the 49ers actually had Army's legendary Heisman Trophy winners, Doc Blanchard and Glenn Davis, but could not get the military to permit them to play during their post-graduation furloughs. And Cleveland actually were down 28-0 at one point in one game in 47, but tied it at 28. New York were the best team in the East. Cleveland was 12-1-1. All that. The Browns won 14-3, and it looked good. Unfortunately, things would look harsh and all that. They would try their best and all that. Cleveland routed Buffalo 49-7 for the title, and they were undefeated. They were 29 games unbeaten in the AAFC after that win. So yeah, the AAFC were fighting and all that. But by 1949, there were only be 7 teams: Brooklyn, Buffalo, Baltimore, Cleveland, Chicago, LA, and San Francisco were the only ones left. All that. Cleveland beat San Francisco 21-7. Cleveland did fantastic. Cleveland were 52-4-3 within the AAFC. Well, 2 days before Cleveland won their 4th title, the 2 leagues made peace. The AAFC would have 3 teams. Cleveland, San Fran, and Baltimore joined the NFL. The LA Dons actually merged with the Rams, sending their players to the LA Rams. And the other 3 teams folded. So, anyway. The Browns and 49ers were definitely going to be in with the merger because they were the 2 strongest teams. There were some people saying that Buffalo should have gotten in instead of Baltimore. And they had better attendance and better ownership. But the problem was that Buffalo's size as a city and climate were seen as problems. And the Redskins owner actually said that he wanted Baltimore to be a natural rival to the Redskins. Buffalo was really upset and all of that. There was a dispersal team. So it worked and all that. So that's what happened. Baltimore was there, but Baltimore went only full after 1 year in the NFL, making it 12 teams instead of 13. Strange how the New York Yanks got in. All that, even though they weren't supposed to be there. The Yanks would actually sell the team to Dallas. After 2 terrible seasons in Dallas, they moved to Baltimore and become the Baltimore Colts again. Anyway, it happened. But Buffalo still got their NFL team through the AFL. So you know how it is, all that. So the big aftermath was that the first game of the 1950 NFL season saw the AAFC champion Browns take on the NFL champion Philadelphia Eagles, purposely trying to make the AAFC look bad. The only problem was it failed miserably as Cleveland won 35-10, and it looked dominant. Cleveland would still keep it their dominance, even though they went from a new conference where they were just unbeatable to the NFL. They still proved they were that good. They even won the 1950 championship game 30-28. So anyway, that's the way it goes. The Niners would do quite well, but they would have to, in the 1950s, they weren't that bad. But the strange thing is that, they would be back in the 80s. They still had a lot of legacy and all that to integrate into football, putting black players in the NFL. And the AAFC had the air travel and put teams on the West Coast and all that. It just happened that way. A fantastic time by all, except for NFL purists. That's what I'm saying. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.